sort of whether or not you want to be on camera, do let us know if you've got any issues there. Friendly, and I think this is the only way actually we're going to get anywhere near our targets as a nation, because there is just so much to do. So on that note, I'm just going to share a Q&A style activity here. So hopefully you can all see my screen now. If you've got a phone or anything you can use to scan this QR, your answers will start appearing live on my screen. So we'll all be able to see. And the question we have here is, what is your biggest barrier to retrofitting? So like I say, some of you might be at different stages. It might be that it's something really practical for you, like materials, which is absolutely fine. For others of you, it might be training, it might be costs. But once you start answering that question, I can see somebody's typing already. We can kind of compare what everybody's going through. And hopefully for our speakers, they'll have a bit of insight before they even get started about what your biggest pain points might be. So I'll give us a couple of minutes there to just start putting their answers in. A skilled workforce, that's the common one that comes up quite a lot. Some of you might be retrofitting your own properties, so you're coming from that perspective. Others of you might be the retrofit coordinator on the other end. And yet, cost of living. So I think justifying the cost of retrofit is a really common sort of barrier point. And this is where, when we think about what I was saying earlier around health, around cost saving, around climate, I think depending on who you're speaking to, it can be really useful to kind of speak in their language, speak about what's affecting them. I used to work at Kensington Chelsea Council, where so much of the conversations I was having was people talking about their health issues. You know, they were struggling with the air quality in their housing. So it was less to do with, oh, you know, I want to reduce my energy bills, more to do with how can I improve my health, right? So each person will have their own motivations. Money as well, cost, cash, yes, payment, not surprising. So this is where I think actually being able to showcase cost saving can be really powerful. So if you can say, look, we did this project here, and yes, it costs X amount, but actually over time, this is how much money they ended up saving on their energy bills. That can be really handy. So projects maybe you even did 5-10 years ago that might be worth thinking about now, and seeing how the performance post retrofit has been working out. Training is nice and big. So a few of you probably just said training. And yeah, so hopefully that's what today is about. That's what resources are about. But I think sometimes there can be almost too many training opportunities, and you don't know which one's the best one to go for. So again, hearing from other people can be really useful. So that was helpful. Hopefully, speakers, you've taken note of that, some of the key things that have come up. And then the second question we have for you all is around, how could RetrofitWorks best support you? So it might be things like free webinars that you can just dial into. Some of you might prefer things like networking and coaching opportunities, but this one's a ranking tool. So it'll be interesting again to see what comes out of this. Okay, practical tools is up there. Oh, it's changing. But yeah, I'd be curious to see, once we get into the discussion, for those of you who've come in, you might have a question you've specifically come with, or you're just here to hear from our speakers' experiences. If you are working on your own, whether that's something that actually is part of what informs what you need from a community like this, whether you want more of that sort of people interaction, or actually you just want a webinar like this you can dial into, get some nuggets, and then carry on with your workday. It varies. Right, I've got 2 more people I can see answering that question. I'll let them go, and then we will move on to our first presentation. Perfect. Okay, we'll leave it on that while it's static. I will stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to pass on to our first retrofit coordinator of the day. Ian, if you could share your slides. Ian, tell us a little bit about your journey and your top tips for us today.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. my name's Ian Preston. I'm one of the in-house retrofit coordinators working in London with able to pay customers. Just check everyone can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see and hear you
Right.
fine, Ian.
Yes.
So a little bit about me. I used to work in publishing, so not maybe super relevant to what I do now. About 20 years ago, I did a career change by taking a master's at the Centre for Alternative Technology in Wales. I'm sure there are a few others on the call who did the same course. Been working in sustainable construction for about 16 years. Working more or less as a retrofit assessor, although the title didn't exist from the start, for about 12 years. And as a retrofit coordinator for about 5 years with RetrofitWorks. And there you can see, on the whole, I got the qualifications after I started doing the job. It's just the way it's worked for me. My understanding of a typical retrofit coordinator role in the industry, I haven't done it, so I can only really speak about how we do it here. But my understanding is, generally speaking, another retrofit assessor surveys the home and then hands over to the retrofit coordinator. And in a lot of cases, the energy efficiency measures may already have been decided before the retrofit assessor visits the home. And their assessment is partly to determine the suitability of the proposed measures. Then the retrofit coordinator takes over, oversees the install. They may or may not visit site. They might do all of their oversight based on contractors' photos, and they're using PAS software a lot, which is kind of driving all the steps in the process. We do it a little bit differently here on the able to pay schemes. So we don't lodge with PAS because we don't have to, but we certainly follow the principles. In London, at least, the retrofit coordinator is often also the retrofit assessor who surveyed the home, unless we get really busy when we get external retrofit assessors to do it for us. But we find that works quite well. So if you're the retrofit assessor and you're also the RA, you have a very in-depth knowledge of the home you're advising on. Our retrofit assessments are done with an open mind. So we visit the home with no preconceptions about what measures might be installed. We go in, we look, we measure, we take the information away, we analyze it, and then we come up with the recommended measures. We take into account what the client tells us about their problems with the home, the budget they have in mind for their works, their time scale, but we aren't too restricted by that information, because after all, the customers are paying for our advice. Sometimes they think they know what they want, but if we have a good idea they haven't had, then we like to be able to tell them, this is what we think you should do. So we analyze all the things they could possibly do. We pick out the best ones and we put our recommendations in a medium-term retrofit plan. Then we have a follow-up call when the customers had time to digest their plan, where they get to ask questions about the plan. We can clarify anything that wasn't clear. And we can also start to discuss next steps in their journey, starting with what we call the building performance requirements, which is kind of like a specification document we write for any works that are done. My colleague Ben will be talking a bit later about some of the next steps, but I'll show you what some of the steps in the early stages of our process look like. So here's a screenshot of the software we use for modeling homes, base cases, and modeling the improvements. So that's a snapshot of the base case for a home I did recently. This is what we call a lab, which is where you get to select from the long list of possible measures you could install. You pick the best ones. There you can see all the metrics, so the estimated costs and savings in terms of emissions, bills, and so on. So you can choose the measures you think will be the best fit for the home and will achieve the best results for the customers. You can change the order. You can edit the measures, maybe change the price, or maybe change the thickness of insulation that you're installing. You can split and group measures into phases to suit the customer's plans. And then you output the lab, and that's the basis of the report that you send to the customer. And here's the front page of one of the reports we've been producing up to now. Inside, it has various figures and graphs. So going from a sort of a snapshot of before and after, and drilling down into the detail of what the measures will achieve. And then also included in the plan is a more descriptive section written by the Retrofit Coordinator where they discuss the measures that have been included and why. Sometimes we discuss the ones we've left out and why we left them out, particularly if the customer said they wanted them, and if we're not recommending them, we need to explain why that is. And then we also start to discuss how these measures will be installed. So it's not a specification, it doesn't go into great detail about products and systems, but it's more guidelines. So we start to discuss things like sympathetic insulation materials for older buildings, why we've put the measures in the order we have, so sort of explaining things like the fabric first approach, why we've included ventilation even though it doesn't save any energy or any carbon, so the importance of ventilation and why it becomes necessary when we install other measures. So what's it like starting out as an RC? I think it's fair to say that as with many jobs and courses, vocational courses, the Retrofit Coordinator course is just the start, but it doesn't really prepare you completely for doing the job. I think from day one and thereafter, you feel as if you don't know enough, but you're expected to know everything. So you're often on the spot. And one particular issue is, particularly when you start, it's not very clear where your responsibilities start and end. So what are you supposed to do as Retrofit Coordinator? What are your roles? What are the boundaries of your role? The reality, I think, is that as with many jobs, you mostly learn on the job. And, you know, every day is a school day. And it's important to be in a kind of a receptive frame of mind, not to think you know everything, but, you know, you're always prepared to learn. You often get asked something you don't know. So I try not to bluff. I give it my best shot, but then I go away, I look things up. I ask colleagues or other contacts what they think, and then I go back to the client or the contractor and say, this is the situation. If it's different from my initial advice, I own up. I don't sort of stick to my guns and pretend I was right all along. And I think another important fact is that unless you're also a retrofit designer, you're not responsible and you're probably not insured to design retrofit measures. You're providing guidance and you're signing off the retrofit designer's proposed solution, but you're not responsible for producing drawings or details or anything like that. Another really important point is the retrofit coordinator role isn't all about technical knowledge. So technical knowledge is very important, obviously, but I think it's fair to say that the soft skills you bring from previous careers is really important. And by soft skills, I mean things like professionalism. So, you know, basics like turning up when you say you'll be there. If you're running late, let people know. And that way you're setting an example to the other people you work with, and you're being the professional face for the customer. Good communication. So I think a big part of the job is basically translation between people without technical knowledge and people with. So sometimes the customer is trying to explain what they want, but they don't necessarily have the language. The contractors may be using language that the customer doesn't understand, and you're sitting in the middle trying to make sure that both parties understand each other. And then another really important soft skill is diplomacy. So hopefully this won't happen often, but every so often you're involved in a project where the relationship has broken down between the customer and the contractor. And sometimes you find that when you get involved, they've reached the point where they're sick of the sight of each other. and the relationship is really broken down. I think sometimes the retrofit coordinator's role is to be the friendly face for both sides, and to keep the discussion positive and constructive and keep the conversation moving forward. So sometimes when there've been problems between a customer and a contractor, the customer might be dwelling on things that happened months before, and it's your job to sort of say, well, how are we going to stop these problems happening in future and to come up with a solution that works for everyone? And then I think the last important point is the importance of being part of a network. So as a retrofit coordinator, you're not alone. You may have colleagues within your organization, or there may be a network that you can belong to where you can share knowledge, ask questions, but also contribute ideas to the pool of knowledge. So that's just about it for me. We'll be taking questions on the presentations at the end, but now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ben Owen, who will talk a little bit more about the later stages in our process in London.
Unmute. Great. Hi, everybody. My name's Ben Owen. I'm a Retrofit Coordinator at RetrofitWorks. Hopefully, everybody can see the screen with my face on it and can hear me okay. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about a particular project. But before I do, I'll talk a little bit about my background as well. I am, if it clicks, there we go. I have a background in engineering. I did that at uni and worked in various engineering consultancies for about 6 or 7 years after that, and then kind of like drifted into kind of sustainability for a while, and then kind of like slowly focused more on the built environment, and then moved on to focusing more on housing, and then also went to CAT, so that's the Centre of Alternative Technology that Ian was talking about in Wales, in around 2016, and there realised I should really be, rather than building new houses, we should be retrofitting older houses. So I started looking at that a bit more. I did the AECB Carbon Light course because the retrofit coordinator role wasn't around at the time, and then eventually did the retrofit coordinator training, and then was luckily enough able to get a job soon after completing that in 2021. With RetrofitWorks, working with the EcoFurb able to pay service, which Ian was describing a bit earlier. I've also started working on my own home, doing my own bit of internal wall installation, using that experience of kind of working on other jobs in the past. And I'm also joined the Home Energy Action Lab, which is a kind of a small group here working in North London, looking at kind of community roles and how to develop community retrofit. But my experience as a retrofit coordinator here at EcoFurb or RetrofitWorks, but predominantly with EcoFurb, is in the able to pay market. So that's people obviously with a bit of cash that would like to make sure that their home is more comfortable to live in, reduce their bills and emissions. And that's, as Ian was saying, it's kind of like looking at doing retrofit assessments, and then doing the SAP modelling, writing the plans, and then the building performance requirements, which Ian touched on, kind of really is kind of a technical specification, or at least a tender document in some ways, which kind of hopefully provides some pictures and images for the contractor to have a look at, and also for the homeowner to understand what's going to happen to their home. And it's often a discussion point as well around, like it can raise questions from both the contractor and the homeowner of what's going to happen to their home, and then make sure that everyone's on the same page. We've always been developing relationships with various contractors during this stage as well. Hopefully you start to work with similar contractors on similar jobs. And I think it's also important to say we don't work under PAS, so we're not restricted to some of their processes or restrictions in technical specifications. I've also done a little bit of extra work under PAS, looking at installations carried out under the LAD scheme here in London. So, but really I'm here to talk about my first retrofit project. And as Ian said, it's kind of a learning process, although this wasn't my very first, it was the first multi-measure one. So I was still pretty fresh, and felt that there was plenty to learn from this. So this home was a 3-bed semi-detached, built around 1930s. You know, it's a solid wall home, mostly double glazed. There was still some single glazing on there. And the elderly occupant had been living there for about 50, 60 years. It was actually her mum's house before that. So had been living there quite a long time, and they had a modest budget. And we're really focused on kind of like trying to, because they've been living there a long time, they felt that the house had been neglected in some way, you know, and wanted to give something back to the house itself, you know, a little bit of TLC, and really kind of focus on kind of like reducing emissions and improving the comfort of the home. Yeah, so here's a little quick journey. This was a kind of came to me in a kind of in a busy period. So we actually had a freelancer retrofit assessor do the assessment, a freelance retrofit coordinator look at that assessment, provide a whole house plan for the homeowner, and then I joined a bit later on during the kind of installation stage. So producing that building performance requirements. So again, that kind of tender document, specification document, and then seeing the process through from there. So I really kind of like started by going to see a house visit, because I hadn't been to the house. It was nice to meet the person living there. Just double check that the measures that they're interested in made sense, and then started to kind of like look around some of the quirks. You know, there was a bit of scope creep during this visit. You know, all of a sudden they were like, well, while the contractor's here, could they also replaster this ceiling? And while they're there, can they do this? And while they're there, can they do that? So there was a little bit of extra scope creep, and that really came on board, particularly when we got contractors to site to do some preliminary surveys for their quotes. So really, it's kind of holding a hand of the homeowner through the process, going from kind of like not knowing much, but meeting the contractors, being there when the contractors are there, to answer any questions, and as Ian said, provide some of those soft skills, and then obviously moving on to the installation stage. And so the 3 kind of big measures that were installed were, there's a new windows and new rear door, EWI, so external wall insulation, internal wall insulation, ventilation, and we had a 3rd contractor do solar panels and a solar diverter as well. This was kind of a relatively quick, I guess, you know, there's a 10-month process from when they first contacted us to the final installation going in, and that, I would say that's relatively quick. You know, sometimes people take time, the contractors are busy, there's the time of year. We picked it with the EWI, we had to wait over the kind of winter months before we could actually really get going in this kind of early spring to get that installed properly, and within kind of like temperatures when it was suitable. Yeah, so here's kind of like a, you know, I quite enjoy the technical side of being a retrofit coordinator, coming from a kind of an engineering background. And I thought I'd struggle with the people side of things, but actually that's also the thing that I've really enjoyed the most, and kind of really feel like I've developed as a retrofit coordinator. So here's a kind of a quick example of some of the sort of things that we do, like a basic floor plan. We're just highlighting sections that we're gonna put EWI around here. You know, internal wall installation is going to go on these party walls here. We're going to be replastering the ceiling now. And you know, which doors are going to be new, which ones are not. So just so everybody's on the same page, there's no ambiguity. And if there is ambiguity, they can refer to that drawing and say, that's not quite clear. Can we look at something else like this? So yeah, that's something we kind of do, more of a talking point than anything. And here's a couple of, you know, before and after pictures. So fairly straightforward from a EWI point of view. There's a few, like the roof needs to be extended here. There's all this soil pipe and the drain pipes, and one of the other things, the scope creep in that sense, was new aluminium guttering installed across all of the home, which looks great. And that was something that wasn't on the original kind of scope of works. That's the back of the house. So you can see the solar panels there, and this rear door was changed, and that window there was changed. You can see back in the old louvered windows that the homeowner installed. I think she said she installed them in the 70s with her mum, just because that was the cheapest thing to do at the time. Yeah, so that's kind of like before and after. And I suppose one of the things, you know, is communication. Communication's kind of key with these kind of processes and these jobs. There's lots of people involved, and it's kind of making sure that we're kind of constantly in communication. And that's again those soft skills coming through. Relying on emails and phone calls for certainly the first part of it, that kind of setting up site visits and things like that, for quotes. But then really WhatsApp kind of came into its kind of own really. As soon as the first installer went to site, I kind of organized a WhatsApp group. So we made sure that all the contractors, the homeowner, and myself were all involved in the same WhatsApp group, so we can kind of send photos and videos, make sure that we get some progress updates. And it was also a place where issues, concerns could be raised by the homeowner or myself. And so we're all on the same kind of group, rather than an email, which sometimes the contractors don't see until later in the day or later in the week. The WhatsApp, I find that, you know, if they're in their van somewhere and someone else is driving, and they're able to then answer quickly, and or jog their memory constantly. It's also a great thing, you know, if from the homeowner's point of view, if there were, you know, there were either people were running late or there were no shows, then there was a chance for the homeowner to kind of raise these kind of things with me instantly. Then I could just jump on the phone to them and just try and smooth things over and move things along. Yeah, so just to kind of wrap up really, from my own personal point of view, just from a technical point of view, checking quotes. So when we got the quotes back from the contractor, was just checking that. And once again, the contractor had quoted for EPS insulation rather than rock wool or mineral wool, as we kind of were expecting. So, you know, just going back and double checking with the contractor that they've got the right materials. One thing I personally missed was the solar diverter got missed off the contractor's quote, but that was quickly added on later on by the contractor, and it wasn't really much of an issue. There's a few quirks related to the neighbour satellite on this particular job. The scaffolding got in the way somehow, and so we had to kind of like move things around there. And also just that ability to, you know, if we're doing external wall insulation, is making sure that the scaffolding is suitable for solar PV as well. So giving them the extra lift or half lift that they need, or, you know, does the scaffolding need to come back to do that? You know, and making sure that the right tags are on the scaffolding so that the insurances for both installers are valid. Looking at some of the soft skills, as kind of Ian's already mentioned, you know, it's generally building that rapport with the homeowner, but also building the rapport with the contractors, you know. And this job was the first job of about 4 or 5 I've done with the same contractor now, and you know, we're quite, you know, again, WhatsApp from my point of view is a much better way of getting hold of the contractor. And from a homeowner's point, you know, there was a single elderly lady living on her own, and you know, I think they really benefited from a bit of hand holding from my point of view, you know, like just taking her through the process. You know, if she had any other questions, she could always just give me a call, or, you know, send me a message on WhatsApp or whatever. And that was a way. And she did say towards, you know, like she probably wouldn't have gone through the process if there wasn't someone there to kind of like hold her hand effectively through it. Yeah, and it's always trying to maintain, as Ian mentioned about the diplomacy, is trying to maintain an independent position, you know, and trying to keep the tone professional. And I think that's something that I've really learned during that job particularly, but also in the job since. And as everything, you just document everything, photos, videos. It's always useful, particularly when you're on the phone and you can't quite remember, you know, you're speaking to somebody or someone gives you a call and they talk about this particular junction or this particular room, and you go, oh yeah, that room, okay, because you've got oftentimes like 5 or 6 houses in your head as well, because you might have just been to like 2 or 3 earlier that week, which were fresh, and now you've got to remember some other houses. So yeah, document everything, keep it accessible so you can have a quick look, and that's it. So that's it from me. I'm going to pass you on to Tom now, who's going to talk through something similar from his own experience, and then I'll stop sharing my screen and go on mute.
Okay, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, good afternoon. My name's Tom Proctor. I'm also a Retrofit Coordinator with RetrofitWorks. I work on the Your Home Better scheme up in Greater Manchester. Slides up soon, not changing. There we go. Now, a bit about myself. My initial degree was in environmental management and conservation, and then my early career was in nature conservation and animal protection. I began renovating my own properties and developed an interest in the environmental impact of buildings, which led me on to my master's degree in environmental architecture, also at the Centre for Alternative Technology in Wales. Following my master's, I trained as a domestic energy assessor and then set up my own business producing EPCs, and also as a retrofit assessor, but like Ian said before, retrofit assessor was really a qualification, and that was working on the Priority Projects Home Energy Master Plans. In recent years, I've completed my retrofit assessor training and incorporated that into my own personal business. And I also completed my retrofit coordinator training and became a freelance coordinator for RetrofitWorks. And then 2 years ago, I joined the staff at RetrofitWorks as a retrofit coordinator on the Your Homes Better scheme in Greater Manchester. So the Your Home Better scheme offers a start-to-finish retrofit service, offering independent, impartial advice to local residents in Greater Manchester. The scheme offers advice on grants to eligible residents through the Feel the Benefit campaign and assessment and coordination services for the able to pay market. And it's these able to pay residents I predominantly work with. Now, as Ian has already discussed, we also use the whole house plan assessment as the starting point for the retrofit journey. However, in Greater Manchester, it's not quite as affluent as some other areas of the country, such as London or Oxford. And we felt that the high price of the whole house plan might be putting some customers off and also eating into already tight retrofit budgets. So for this reason, we also offer a cheaper option of a retrofit option survey, which is similar to the whole house plan, and it looks at all measures available to the property, but doesn't go into the costings and calculation side of it, which reduces the cost. We also offer a single measures option where clients can come to us directly to get quotes for measures they've already decided upon, whether that's they just want a heat pump, they just want solar, they just want one particular area of the property insulated. Following the assessment and the report, if the homeowner wishes to proceed further, we can then write the specifications, so the BPRs that Ben discussed, acquire and approve quotes from contractors, and then liaise with our installers. Your Home Better then oversees the works that are being installed by visits to the site at specific times, and then the final sign-off of the completed project. Now, up in Manchester, we have a colleague, Dave Bailey, who's on the course with us, who's our installs manager, and he takes over at that point. Okay. So this is a case study of a project we've recently completed. It's a 1920 semi-detached house. It's got a loft conversion that's quite old now, and then also a recent cellar conversion that was done to building regulations. The trigger point for this client was that the flat dormer roof was leaking and needed to be replaced. So they decided at the same time they would undertake some other retrofit upgrade measures. Now, this particular client did go down the whole house plan route, and the whole house plan identified a number of measures, some of which, such as photovoltaics, were decided at a very early stage weren't practical for the property due to the south-facing roof being mostly taken up by the dormer. Oops, sorry. Now, with this particular property, the original whole house plan was actually done prior to me even starting with Your Homes Better back in November 22. And the whole process took nearly 2 years. So compared to Ben's project, quite a long time. This delay was mainly due to finding reliable installers, particularly for fabric measures in the early days of the scheme. So we only wanted to work with installers that are willing to use the correct materials and methods. An example would be external wall insulation. A lot of installers were coming back with EPS insulation for solid brick properties, which we didn't recommend. So it took a while to find installers who were willing to work with materials such as wood fibre, which we wanted them to work with. A lot of firms were also tied up with the grant funded schemes, so there wasn't a lot of contractors actually available to do the work. So during this time, it's important to keep good communication with the client during this period to assure them that we were looking for installers and we hadn't forgotten them. So eventually the clients decided on the following measures to their property that they wanted Your Homes Better to assist with. This was room and roof insulation to the whole of the loft room, loft insulation to the small amount of loft area that was left, external wall insulation to the gable wall, suspended floor insulation to the undercroft that wasn't converted as part of the cellar conversion, and then ventilation upgrades. So as the flat roof needed replacing, internally the roof rooms were already completed, it was decided that the insulation would be applied externally by stripping off all the cladding and the roof, insulating, and then recladding and re-roofing. Now you can see the picture, we are actually using a PIR insulation here. Normally we would recommend wood fibre for loft rooms, which help with summer overheating. However, we were quite constrained on space, both going upwards because we were very close to the apex of the original property, and out to the sides because we were already up to the gable wall and the neighbour's property on the other side. So using PIR allowed us to get the insulation required within the space we had. Now, from the initial survey, as you can see from the earlier slide, these loft rooms were very high up, so 4 stories at the back. This meant assessing that at the original assessment was very difficult. So for this particular property, once the scaffolding was up and we were able to get up there, we then revisited the site, both the Retrofit Coordinator, the client, and the installers, to reassess the best way forward. And this was the decision we came to. So this is an example that retrofit is an ongoing assessment. It's not an assessment right at the start, and that's exactly what you do. It's ongoing, and decisions and changes need to be made along the way. So this slide shows the small area of loft that was not covered by the roof room. So the insulation was topped up to 400 millimeters. The hatch and the hatch was insulated and draft proofed. And then also you can see that the lighter yellow material is the stud wall to the roof room. So that was also insulated from this side. This is a picture of the gable wall that was insulated. As the property was solid brick, it was very important to use a breathable material. So 200 millimeters of wood fibre was used for this property, and then a render finish. The nice green colour was the client's decision. And then this is the cellar that was, well, the cellar was converted recently to building regulations, so it was already insulated. However, the undercroft to the side wasn't insulated. So an access hatch was cut from the cellar wall to the underfloor area. The floorboards were sealed from beneath, and then 200 millimeters of insulation was fitted between the joists and held in place with netting and timber bats. As it was a suspended floor and we're insulating it and sealing it, it was very important to ensure it was adequately ventilated, so additional air bricks were installed in the property. And following that, it was then made good with an insulated hatch, and the cellar made good afterwards. Oops, sorry. Okay. And then because we were installing quite a few measures that were improving the air tightness of the property, it was important to then upgrade the ventilation. Now, the homeowners were replacing some of the windows themselves, which would have trickle vents automatically installed, and any old windows had retrofit trickle vents put in. And then we also then fitted continuous humidity controlled extractors to the bathrooms and the kitchen. Okay, so in conclusion, it's very important to manage the expectations of the clients from the start regarding things like the cost. So with the whole house plan, as Ian showed us, it shows the sort of cost of each measure, how long the works will take. So that includes the finding the installers, approving quotes, and the actual works themselves, and the disruption caused to the clients. If a client has never had any major building work done to their property before, then they won't be used to the level of disruption in terms of things like plumbing, where your toilet might not be usable, heating being cut off, electrics being cut off, and also the general dust and mess involved in a retrofit project. It's very important to have good communication between the client, the retrofit coordinator, and the contractors, especially if there's multiple contractors involved through different measures. Making sure the client is aware of what's happening, when it's happening, and anything they need to be doing. Oops, sorry. We then need to monitor and evaluate and implement changes in the original plan as the project progresses. This example is with the flat roof on the dormer that needed to be assessed as we got to it rather than beforehand. Having regular site visits to check on the works at the set stages, which is the job of our installs manager. And then finally, having a sign off with the client, ensuring they are happy with the work, that everything is complete, and that they have all the relevant documentation, they know how everything works. It's then important to evaluate the project so we can learn for ongoing jobs. And then finally monitor the project over coming time, going back to the client in maybe a season later, so after the winter, to see how the measures implemented have impacted the client's comfort and fuel usage. Okay, so I'll hand you back over to Master now for the Q&As.
Great, thank you so much, Tom, Ben, and Ian. I'm going to dive straight into the questions because we've got about 10 minutes, but I think you'll agree that was a huge wealth of information, case studies, experiences, and more. While we get up our interactive Q&A, there was a question, Ben, for you around how your services were paid for. I think just particularly given the sort of setup that you and Ian were describing, if you can cover that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, sure. Yes, the whole house plan, so that kind of the early stage, which includes the retrofit assessment, costs currently costs around £600. It can vary, like Tom was saying. They've got a slightly cheaper service in Manchester, but for here, at least here in London, it's around £600, which includes the retrofit assessment and the whole house plan. Then if you want to move on further, get that kind of more technical specification, the tender document we talked about called build performance requirements. I mean, that really depends on what measures are being installed and our level of technical input. So that can range from between £800 all the way up to, you know, 2,000 and possibly even more, depends on how big you're going to go. And that's really just to obviously produce a document, but also handle the quotation stage and the time spent dealing with that sort of that interaction between yourself, the contractor, and ourselves to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and also some site visits to make sure that the contractors are happy doing what they're doing, and you're happy they're quoting for what they should be quoting for. And then the install stage, it really depends, you know. In the eco-furb thing, the homeowner never paid any more money. It was the money came from the contractor, so the contractor paid RetrofitWorks a fee for our time in terms of site visits and that kind of managing the project. So that was a percentage fee based upon the total install cost.
Perfect, thank you, Ben. And hopefully you can all see the Q&A on my screen now. So remember, you can submit your question by scanning the QR code and upvote whatever questions you want to see answered. So just Ian, on PAS, I know there were a couple of questions in the chat on this as well. So can you just briefly describe what it is and when you do have to comply and when you wouldn't necessarily?
PAS 2035 is a government-sponsored standard covering retrofit measures, the installation of retrofit measures. And the situation is you only have to formally use PAS and lodge if it's a requirement of the job. So, for example, if there's some funding where PAS compliance is attached. You can choose to use it when you don't have to, but if there's no external requirement to use it, you don't have to.
Great. Okay, thank you. And then this is really to any one of the speakers actually who feels it's their best place to answer, but a few questions around onboarding to RetrofitWorks actually, so how that whole process works, and then whether they're actually free tools and spreadsheets that people can use potentially as being part of RetrofitWorks or elsewhere that you can speak to. Oh, Tom, I can see you've come off mute.
I never went back onto mute, sorry. Oops, sorry, I'm saying something.
Sorry, I think we're talking over each other. I was just going to say that the software I showed you earlier that we used for our labs and to analyze the base model and the effect of the measures is available. It's not an in-house system, it's Parity Projects, our sister company that developed that, and that's available for freelance or other companies to use, but not for free. There are fees attached to that.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any free tools there.
Yeah, so I know that you can get some free resources, general guidance and things like that. But yeah, to Ian's point about tools, I think this is where the community element is quite useful. So if you have any that you're using, feel free to put them in the chat for others. Any links or web links that might be handy, do include that as well. And then I think, Sabrina, have you got your hand up, or RetrofitWorks, whoever's behind the screen there?
Hi, it's Natalie. I'm internal operations manager at RetrofitWorks. Just wanted to say, in terms of onboarding with RetrofitWorks, we have a great membership team, Sabrina and David, who, if you reach out to them, they'd be happy to help you through that process. We're going through some changes. We're looking at different things that we can offer, more things that we can offer as time goes on. So your feedback is really valuable. But what we can do is put a little our email address in the chat for you guys to reach out if you're interested, and they can give you a little bit more information. We do some like vetting and that sort of thing to make sure you're okay for installation. I'm not probably the best person to speak about it. Definitely Sabrina and David are, but just wanted to give that a little heads up. Thanks.
Thanks, Natalie.
Perfect. And Sabrina, can you just touch on whether RetrofitWorks onboards self-employed assessors and coordinators as well?
Yeah, I believe we do use self-assessors, and again, what I'll do is I'll send out all the information to everyone that's attended today. With all the, you can contact me and David, and we'll be able to answer your questions and set up a team meeting with you one-on-one.
Perfect. Hand up from Dave.
Yeah, morning everyone. Really enjoyed that presentation. I've been to a number of these bootcamp events, if you're talking specifically about public funded schemes, because PAS is a publicly available scheme, so they apply to a lot of different aspects of public works. So if you reach out, there are other services available apart from Parity, and if you find out there's a scheme you're interested in, certainly Social Housing Fund, they will list available software options that people use, and some of them have a preference, some of them don't, but reach out to us and we'll put join some dots together for you.
Great, thank you, Dave. And just coming back to the Q&A, there's been a question around RTF Coordinator Level 5 qualification. So again, I don't know if any of the speakers want to speak to that, whether that's something you're planning to go for or have experience with already. Is that you, Ben? You're coming off for me?
Yeah, I can talk about it. Retrofit Coordinator Level 5 qualification, yes. I mean, it's a while since I last done it, before I did it. It was 2020. I did it at the end of 2020. And at the time, it was with the Retrofit Academy. And personally, I wasn't massively pleased with that course. However, I believe it's changed, it's become much more robust. So I would just double check with somebody who's done it a bit more recently. I don't know if anybody else on the call has done it recently, could add something in the chat. But I believe Retrofit Academy and Elmhurst are the ones that are doing it at the moment, but there might be others.
Great, thank you. Tom, I think it would be useful to hear from you actually thinking about your case study with what systems you're using for project management, if any. I know we spoke about communication and things like WhatsApp to help, but was there anything else that came up on your projects?
We use Airtable as a management tool, which is where we record all our projects, where they're up to, and then everyone in the team has access to that, so we can all see what's been done, what's planned for the future. And then we also have a weekly catch up with our main contractor. So we go through every single project there, go through Airtable and make sure everyone's up to speed, knows what they're doing.
Great. Has anyone got experience with CoreLogic rather? No, none of our speakers, I don't think. But brilliant. Yeah. And then a question. Oh, Ian, sorry.
Yeah, I've used CoreLogic for the early stages, for the assessment stage, but not for installs for a few months, last few months.
Interesting. Okay, well, we've hit bang on 12:30. I think we'll end on one final question, if everyone's okay to stick around. We've had someone here ask, what would you say are the greatest challenges to starting as a freelance retrofit coordinator? So I'll ask that to each of the speakers to keep short and sweet and maybe end on a bit of a positive for us there as well. Do you want to start us off, Ian?
I'm trying to remember. I mean, I was initially a freelance retrofit coordinator, but that was in the very early days before the qualification existed. So I think it wasn't quite clear to me when I first started what the role consisted of, what my responsibilities were. But obviously since then, I've done the Retrofit Coordinator Level 5 course, and that makes it pretty clear what the role consists of. Other issues of being a freelance retrofit coordinator is sometimes you can be working for a fixed fee, and sometimes what you actually have to do for that fee can exceed what you initially anticipated. Just something to bear in mind.
Yeah. Ben, how about you?
I've had the joy of never being a freelance retrofit coordinator, so I don't think I've got much to add on that one. I got very lucky, I think. Fairly fresh-faced of learning on the job, and hopefully been able to, you know, Ian talked quite a lot about a network of coordinators at RetrofitWorks, which has been useful, particularly the last, you know, year or so as we've gone to installs. And, you know, I think if we could try and extend it out to a wider group of coordinators who are freelance here at RetrofitWorks in the membership, I think that would be useful to anybody who's just starting, and also passing on that experience that these people who have started and are doing well can help others.
Brilliant. And Tom?
I was freelance for a while. I was self-employed for many years. The sort of DEA side of it was very simple to know what I was meant to be doing. The retrofit assessor side, slightly more clear. But retrofit coordinator, I did struggle being freelance to know exactly what was expected, the paperwork involved, the lodgements, insurance. So I was lucky in that I was doing it freelance through RetrofitWorks, which guided me through all that part of it. And then I was taken on as staff at RetrofitWorks. So like Ben, I've never actually been an official retrofit coordinator, sort of lodging through PASS. I've always either done it through schemes which aren't using PASS, such as RetrofitWorks, or actually being employed doing it. So it is a struggle for freelance to know exactly what is expected of you, and it's quite difficult to get that information from insurance brokers, from accreditation schemes, or from Trustmark.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just seems like this common theme really is getting hold of other people who are doing it and hearing from them. So we have gone slightly over. I'm sad to end it here. I'm sure we could carry on talking. And I know there are a few more questions that we could have covered, but the email address for RetrofitWorks is on the screen, and also obviously the website. If you had anything you still wanted to discuss, or even a case study you thought might be useful to share from your own experience for future webinars, do get in touch with the team. We've got a final QR code for you, I promise. After this, no more QR codes. You can access your CPD credits and certificate using that now. The team will be sharing this recording internally, so if there was anything you missed or wanted to rewatch, you can access that too. But overall, I just want to thank everyone for attending, and of course our speakers for sharing their insights with us today. Hopefully this will be one of many to come from RetrofitWorks. Thank you all and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.